Welcome back to my Move and Inspire podcast. Today I have Julie Montagu as my guest. Julie, I am so honoured that you found time to come on my podcast. You know that you are the teacher that got me into yoga. Julie's classes got me through a really tough time when I'd been signed off work, and I would go religiously to like 2 or 3 classes a week and always leave feeling super, super inspired. So welcome, Julie.
Oh, thank you, Sophie. It's so nice being here. And for everybody who's listening, it was a real, as Sophie knows, she's been very patient with me getting everything set up with my lighting, with my mics, with my technology. But we've made it. So, and it's been great. And it's so nice just to see you in Bali with me in pouring rain, United Kingdom. So we miss you here, but we're also very, very envious, and envious in a good way that you're there with lots of sun, for sure. So thank you for having me. It's so nice to see you and chat.
Oh, I know, it's so nice. I do really, really miss your classes, and it makes me think, like, I mean, not just because I'm in Bali, but because of obviously the current situation. But I remember queuing up. I'd get like there super early to try yoga, to queue up to your classes to get in, because it was always like a scramble to get a good spot. And like, yeah, your classes at Try Yoga, I actually just stumbled across them as well. I didn't know who you were before I just came across one of your classes and was like, I am hooked.
Oh, that's so nice. I know, those were the good old days. I mean, no, listen, we're still in okay days, but I know the good old days of being mat to mat. Do you know what I mean? Being able to be 1 inch away from each other. But no, do you know, I reminisce about those days because obviously I've been teaching at Try Yoga, and I still teach there through Zoom now, but I've been teaching there now for, gosh, coming up to 9 years. I cannot even believe it, which is bonkers. But and it, but it's like with everything, and I think you know this, Sophie, because then you did one of my courses as well. But knowing this as a teacher, it's there's no immediate sort of growth. It's not like all of a sudden you become a yoga teacher and then you wake up the next day and your classes are being sold out left, right, and center. It's a lot of work, but we love it, so we work hard at it. I think that's the real difference between being a yoga teacher and maybe doing something that you're not satisfied in your current situation as far as your job goes. With yoga teachers, we become these teachers because we love the teachings, we love how yoga makes us feel, and we want to be able to pass this on to other people. But as you know, I think I watched something which on your Instagram the other day, which was really important. And it's becoming, when I started over 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it wasn't as saturated market as it is right now. And I remember, you've got great tips for everybody out there, and which is great, because when I started 12 years ago, we didn't even have social media. So when I started teaching, there was no social media. I was flyering in my local neighborhood in London to get people to go. And now times have changed. The flyer has become Instagram, if you like.
Totally. And I remember actually you telling that story of how you would flyer outside your kids' schools and then rent a church hall. And I actually started teaching just kind of before I would say like the boom in London. And because of your story that you told me that you grafted that hard, I was like, because I was basically rejected from most yoga studios because they said, oh, you need 3 to 5 years teaching experience. So I went and hired a studio and flyered around Fulham, and I did it because I was like, Julie Montagu did this, so maybe I can do this and make it work. And like, it did work for me. So I do think that story of yours is super empowering.
Yeah, and I think and today, obviously, we don't have we don't have the church halls that we can go into now. So you've become this yoga teacher, and I look at it now and I think, oh my gosh, for people who are, and I run teacher training courses, as you know, and people becoming, and they're all online now, and people who are becoming teachers, they say to me, but how am I going to develop a community when everything's online right now? And I use the exact same example that I used of the church hall and the flyering. Your Zoom or whatever you're using, your YouTube Live, or it can become a community in itself. But it's about being able to cultivate and create that community cleverly online. And it's about being, what are you doing online that's clever and that's different and that you've got your sort of unique selling point? Because things have shifted such an enormous amount for everybody around the world. But I know that, we're talking about yoga here, and with yoga teachings, I've had to put all my my teacher trainings all 100% online. Obviously, we're all doing teaching online. You've got your Move and Inspire. Everything's online. So we've been able to, we've had to really sort of navigate this online world, but it doesn't mean that you can't create a community, just like what I did in my church halls, just like what you did in your church halls, just like what I was doing in Tri Yoga, because Tri Yoga, that became a real community there. Not just necessarily the studio itself, which of course is a community, but your class becomes a community. People can create friendships out of that. And you can, in a sense, replicate almost the exact same thing through online, but you've got to be clever. And you probably, to be realistic, you do have to work maybe a little bit harder these days. Number one, this market is more saturated with yoga teachers, but also we've gone online. How do you reach those people? And it's thinking out of the box. I've had to do it, in this current situation.
Yeah, and interestingly, I was really worried because I had such a lovely little community at the Power Yoga Company when I left London, and I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to build that online. And I actually think that online, I've got a more powerful community. It's really interesting. And I heard something where Jason Crandall was saying he actually feels like it's easier to teach online because on Zoom you've got people's names and you can really see and even though we're not physically adjusting, you can see a lot if someone's got their camera in a good place and you've got their name, so you can be like, Paula, left hand, press through the knuckles a little bit more, and people really love that connection of actually saying their name. So I do think, in a way, even though this situation has been really difficult for yoga teachers, there is such a chance to create a great community online.
There really is. And I think, like you, obviously I still teach online through Tri Yoga, but just once a week now, but I've created my own community. And we can talk about that a little bit later about how to create those communities. But I've created my own community, and I don't, but funny enough, interestingly enough, I don't do Zoom, Sophie. So I actually do YouTube Live, and people ask me all the time, like, why do you do YouTube Live? Because you can't see the person on the other end of the screen. And for me personally, when this pandemic started, and I'm going to kind of move into sort of building your online community, when this pandemic started almost a year ago, everybody was moving to Zoom, and which is a great platform. But I decided, in the back of my head, I thought, okay, I'm going to do YouTube Live so that I can do it live. Now, I can't see the person, but everybody can chat to me through the chat bar, right? Just like they can do through Zoom. You can chat, but I can't see the person. But I've also really noticed that I think, for me, part of my community is a little bit older. So they have children, so they're homeschooling their children. They don't necessarily want their cameras on because, they're being pulled away. They don't want to feel. So I think it goes both ways. And I'm sure you've seen it on Zoom as well, Sophie. Some people will have their cameras on, some people will have their cameras off. For me, I did the YouTube Live, no cameras are on. And it was, at the beginning, it was really for my own sort of personal gain. And I'll tell you why in a second. But again, my demographic, I think, of the people who come to my class are older, and they usually do have a family. And so having the camera on, in one sense, it can almost make you feel guilty if you have the camera on and then you have to go away and help do fractions with your kids for a quick sec. Do you know what I mean? And then you're like, oh, I've just left my mat. And so I think, but personally for me, I knew at the beginning, and I mean, there's no right or wrong answer, of course. or right or wrong way to do it. But at the beginning, I wanted to record all of my classes to create an on-demand library. I knew where I was going with it. So YouTube Live, when you do it live, it literally records the class for you. And you have to do, because you can't see anybody. I do the whole class with my community. So when I'm teaching, I'm doing literally the entire class as if I was teaching it on YouTube. And so then it retains, in a sense, it records a copy, and that became my on-demand library. So when I decided to launch my sort of subscription membership platform in September of 2020, I had already over 100 classes that were already recorded, and all I had to do was top and tail the beginning and the ends of them. So just go into basically your movie editor, top and tail them, and then I could re-upload them to Vimeo or to YouTube, or really to the on-demand library. That's what I was doing. So there's so many clever ways that people can create content and create a community, and it's really, you've got to decide what's the right one for you. Have I been able to create a community on YouTube Live? Absolutely, but I've done it through my subscription membership service, which I'm sure you've done the exact same way. Whether it's Zoom or YouTube Live, you're still creating this community because we can now offer these subscription sort of community membership package. I don't want to call it a package, but it's a community. It's a subscription community, really.
Yeah, I think it's great, whichever way you can do it. And also something I definitely learned from you was about, as you said, be really clever with your content. Like, if you're filming a live class, record it so that you can put it up on your channel, because I do exactly the same. And someone can do it in their own time. They're not having to be there for the live class. And it's like repeating your content as much as possible is like a huge tip that I'm trying to give newer yoga teachers at the moment.
Yeah. It's really reusing content, and I think it's reusing content. That's the big thing. If you record something, you need to reuse that content, whether you can speed it up and put it on your Instagram, whether you can take a bit of it out and put it on your Facebook page, whether you can somehow cleverly chop it so you can make it into a 30-minute class. Like, that hour class can be used for in like 5 different ways of content. And it's looking at how you can reuse that 1 hour class and break it apart and reuse that content, because we can do that now. And that's what's so incredible about the tools that we have. But it is taking the time to learn the tools, learn the editing tools, learn the lighting. As Sophie now knows from my setup this morning, my husband came in and set up the lighting because the lighting was bad. I had to, I'm borrowing my son's AirPods right now, but I know how to use them. It just takes me a little bit longer.
And it's the same with this. So my first season of my podcast, I was just recording audio. And then someone said to me, why aren't you filming them? And I was like, oh, maybe I should be doing that. And so I'm now filming them so I can have them on YouTube, and then I can cut them together for Instagram. Yeah. And it just, again, it brings you're able to give more value from exactly the same thing. So yeah, it's like finding all these clever ways.
It's right.
Less effort.
It's finding all these clever ways. Exactly, less effort. And it's finding all these clever ways to use the content, not as a one-off, but over and over again. And I think, and that is so important in today's world. But also going back to what you've cleverly done, what I've done, what a lot of yoga teachers have done, but even for new yoga teachers out there, that question of, but how do I create a community? Create a community by being in constant contact with the people who are coming to your classes. I can tell you, hand on my heart, and I think this is probably one of my biggest takeaways to anybody out there listening to this, is that your community will not, I cannot stress this enough, will not come from the amount of followers you have on Instagram. So if you're thinking that right now, I'm asking you just to absolutely put that into the rubbish bin and know that that is not true. And I can tell you this, I do have a lot of followers, but I can tell you hand on heart that the community that I've built through my membership and subscription base, and I'm sure it's the same for you as well, Sophie, has not been from people seeing me on Instagram and then being like, oh, I'm gonna subscribe to her membership, or I'm gonna do her teacher training. No way. Like, I'll get a couple, don't get me wrong, but the community that I've created online has come from, hands down, 100% word of mouth. Absolutely. So my takeaway for anybody is, get a couple people to your classes, have them, and if they keep coming back, that's your community. They can then spread the word to their neighbors, or to, you know, the people on their class, in their kids' classrooms, the parents in their kids' Zoom classrooms. It literally is word of mouth. The community that I've created, the majority of them, and I mean majority, probably 95% of them, Sophie, have come through word of mouth. I got an email yesterday saying, hi, it's so-and-so from Switzerland. My sister has been doing your online classes since lockdown started in March. She kept telling me to join. She did one class and then she subscribed to my membership community. But it's through word of mouth. And that is going to be your best, in my view, your best way to create the community. So for the community that you already have, whether it's one or two people, it doesn't matter. What are you doing for those one or two people? What content are you giving them? What are you giving them? A meditation? What's your unique, I don't hate to use it because I use it all the time, your USP. What makes you different from Sophie or from Julie? What do you have to offer? And then continue to offer that, rather than saying, oh, I should be doing this because that person on Instagram does, I should be doing 8,000 handstands and posting 8,000 handstands on Instagram because that gets a lot of likes and that person's doing it and they must be getting lots of people to their classes. I mean, I can do a handstand, no problem, but it's rarely ever on my Instagram because I don't feel that I kind of need to do that. B, that's not really what my classes are about. If you want to go up and do a handstand in my class, go ahead. I'm not necessarily teaching handstands in fact, I'm not teaching handstands in my class. I can recommend people, but I just think, make sure that you're authentic to what you want to teach. I know that if people in my class want to do some more advanced things, they can do it. They're in their own house on their own screen, and they can whip it up into their hands and themselves. But what I want to do is I want to teach a really good class that has the elements that are close to my heart. So energy, yeah, for me, I have a lot of energy. So I know my classes are very, very energetic. I'm never going to sway away from that. The second I start going into poses that I know my community necessarily isn't really looking for, I've gone away from authentically what I want to teach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's that authenticity with any teacher will always really shine through, and it will be what brings people back. Because when I came to yoga, the stereotype I had in my head was like chanting and stretching, and then I came to your class and you were there being like so energetic and talking about your 4 kids, and then like reading an interesting blog at the beginning, which was like an amazing life lesson, which always weirdly would always work really well with what I was working on in therapy at the time. And then you were being really honest about the difficulties you had, and it just blew my mind. And I think, yeah, that truth, that authenticity is going to be what keeps pulling people back, for sure.
It is, and I think, yeah.
I was just going to say on that note, because I obviously know like what brought you to yoga, but I'd love you to just explain a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so I mean, listen, it's like been so long. It's like well over a decade now. And as you mentioned, I've got 4 kids, and they're all much older now from when I first started yoga. I mean, when I first started teaching yoga, I was talking about my son who was 4 years old. Do you know what I mean? Now he's, he's properly a teenager, in secondary school. So, and people remember stories about my youngest, just funny stories, but I would bring them in, and I would bring in my own life experiences. So, I wasn't, I'm very careful with the line that I wanted to draw as far as the boundaries of going way too personal into some details in my life and being able to share some of the difficulties I went through. So I think, my husband, my husband was ill for a long, long time, a really long time. I'm talking years. And I think that then shaped really the path that I'm on now, and the path that we're both on together, and the path and how we've raised our children with making sure that we, have brought the value of compassion into our home so they could feel that and also know that that's obviously for us one of the most important values out there is compassion. And I think me being able to open up to my students about what I was going through at the time was relatable, and what I'm going through, and right now, but things shift, like right now, what I'm going through now in particular, not just the pandemic, but my kids are getting older. It's heartbreaking to me. So being able to even share something like that with my online community, saying I do have days that I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got, a 22-year-old, and and that is heartbreaking when your kids get older, and that's not very much talked about. So I think it's looking at what you're going through now, and if you're willing to open up about it in the way that you want to open up about it. So, and that brings me back to, I think, how, and this is what I kind of want to really get across is, as a yoga teacher, or if you're on Instagram and you're developing your community, it's making sure that you're opening up because you want to and not because you think it's going to get the amount of likes. So, and that's, I tell my students that in my teacher training program, that is to really sit down with yourself and have that conversation and ask yourself, what do I want to reveal in my community and online? How much of it? And what do I want to hold back? So I'm very careful, Sophie, I don't post photos of my kids on Instagram. So once a year, because I get permission. I've never posted photos of my kids on Instagram. I made that decision 7 years ago when I had it, more than that, in 2013. I love it. I love other people who post pictures of their kids. I like them all. They're super cute. I wish I had little babies right now or little kids. But for me personally, that was a line that my husband and I drew. We just didn't want our kids on social media. So you've got to make decisions like that. You have to make decisions of how much of your personal life do you want to put out there, and how much do you want to hold back? So yes, of course, I am able to share, and my husband shares because he's set up an amazing charity about to help others about what he went through. But he was ill for those many years. Now, did I get into the specifics around it? No. So I drew the line there, but I went through something quite harrowing, and so did he. So it's, for me, anybody listening to this, I really can't stress enough for you to make the decision. And you may want to be that person that tells everybody your entire life story and putting it out there. And I'm sure that will help people. For us personally, and when I say us, I mean me as my family, I'm very careful about what I put out there and what I don't put out there. Does that make sense? And you have to do it personally for you. I'm sure that if I were to post tons of pictures of my kids, I would get thousands and thousands of likes on that because I've seen it before. But I choose not to because they're my kids. And I don't want people saving the photos of my kids and having my kids go to school and somebody pulling up my Instagram account and saying, we just saw you on, and that will happen. It could happen. I don't say it will, and it could happen. I want them to have their own life. That was a decision I made personally for myself.
Yeah, and I think it's also about like timing as well. A lot of people have pushed me on Instagram like, oh, you're in Bali. What about your husband? And it's taken me a really long time. I still haven't even really properly said it on Instagram about our separation. And I talk about it in more like intimate like workshops or with my channel, or I've just only this past couple of episodes that I've recorded talked about separation and divorce, and that's just because for me it's taken a lot of time to be okay with starting to talk about that. And I'm like, we're now like 14, 15 months from when we separated. So yeah, I think I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think and that's the thing. It does take time, and I think it's just what what you want to put out there, and when you want to put it out, and how you want to put out. I mean, remember, for me, like I said, I love looking on Instagram at other people's kids' photos. I'm like, oh my God, it's so cute. It's just something that we chose not to do. Do you know what I mean? And like what you said, for me, and way back when my husband wasn't well, exactly the same thing. In my workshops, when I'm in a closer community and I know my students and I can share that, I did share more intimate there. But when you're on a platform with thousands of people following you and you have no idea who's behind the screen, you got to think, for me, I had to think very hard about that on what I want to share with those people who I actually don't know. I haven't seen them face to face, whether it's through a screen or if it's in my yoga class. So it's about creating boundaries, I think, for different areas in which you are embarking on, whether it's your membership community, probably you'll share a lot more. I do. Or if it's on Instagram, on a platform that you don't really know who's behind the screen. You might know some of them, of course you do, but not all of them.
Yeah, I totally agree. In terms of like all the other bits and bobs you're doing, because like you are probably the most busy yoga teacher I know. What do you want to talk about first? I'm like, we could literally talk about so many different things, but I mean, yeah. I know. What do you want to talk about?
I'll keep it short and sweet, everybody. I won't bore anybody. I wish I wasn't the busiest yoga teacher, but I think, one of the things, Sophie, and you and I've talked about this before when you've come to, one of my trainings and things like that. And it's about yoga can open up so many different doors. So we become yoga teachers and we're on that course, we're on that path to teach yoga and to give this gift of yoga to others and to continue to give it to ourselves. But with that, the longer you're on that path, the more that doors can really open up. So for me personally, obviously doing lots of workshops has led to public speaking and being very confident in public speaking. And of course, teaching classes gives you the confidence to teach in front of people and to speak in front of people. So I think the biggest thing for me was obviously that has rolled into presenting. So, this could be anybody listening to this, having the confidence to teach and to speak in front of people can lead to public speaking roles, to being an expert in your field, to going on those morning programs or podcasts or radios or whatever it is to speak. And so for me, I was fortunate enough to land a TV presenting role on nothing to do with yoga, but to do with historic houses. I'm sitting in one right now. You can probably see this mantle right here, which is 400 years old. I can see the date up there, 1604, because I live in one, so I'm quite passionate about, as an American, the history that the UK has. And from that, I was able to not randomly, but get a presenting role for a TV series called An American Aristocrat. And I luckily get to go around the United Kingdom and film at some of the most extraordinary homes in the United Kingdom, but how they've really transformed themselves in the 21st century. It's not like what it was even 100 years ago, where you've got butlers and maids and cooks and and footmen, like Downton Abbey vibes. That just doesn't exist anymore. These homeowners have this real burden now to keep these homes commercially viable, because if they don't, it gets sold to somebody who doesn't have that attachment and can't tell the stories like the homeowners can tell the stories. My in-laws, the Earl and Countess of Sandwich, they're the only people who can tell these stories of their ancestors. And of course we can, because they're passing it on to us. So this TV series, I go around the house, I meet these different houses, extraordinary homes, and I've been lucky enough in the middle of a pandemic. It aired in America and over here, and it did really well. So we were recommissioned, thank goodness, for a second season. So luckily, I start filming again in April, and I'll go to other homes as well. So I think for anybody out there listening, and especially if you're a yoga teacher, like this, yes, I've got a passion in history, because it helped that I married into a very historical family, the Montagu family. But I wouldn't have gotten the presenting job. They could have picked anybody, right? They could have picked anybody to do and present this job. It's public speaking has definitely helped me land a role like this. It's not like I was the only one up for this job. There were other people that they were looking at for this presenting job. So I think it's finding yoga can give anybody so many opportunities for other things. And it is definitely, I attribute my public speaking ability to yoga 100%.
Yeah, it's so cool that so many different opportunities can come from yoga, and because it's just about on a different direction. It's just I keep saying that like yoga's about getting better at life. So now I'm kind of going off into different avenues as well, and it just presents so many opportunities. So I think it's so cool that you got that opportunity to present. With TV, I want to ask you about TV, because obviously I used to work in TV, but I worked in quite a different type of TV. So I worked in TV dramas, and what is yours called? Like a documentary or reality?
Yeah.
What's it?
So it's a documentary. So yeah, so I'm the presenter, and then I meet with the homeowners, obviously. But then I meet with different experts, whether it's on the Icon Basilica, which was Charles the First's autobiography when he was imprisoned, to super fun things like steam engines. I know that, but steam engines, learning more about cricket, and even like gardening. So I mean, I promise you, my knowledge on sort of anything English and the country house has like gone up massive amounts of level. But it's a full on, I mean, the days are long.
It's not glamorous.
No. And that's exactly right. And I know that you and I have had this conversation before, because I know that you were working really long days. And for me, Sophie, it's like, I can't even describe it. It's like you're in this bubble, and I wake up for hair and makeup at 6 a.m. I'm on scene, my first scene. I'm being picked up to go to my first scene. Obviously, I'm staying in a hotel, but picked up around 7:30. I'm on set. I'm filming by 8:15. These are 12-hour days. 12, and I'm the presenter. So I'm in every single scene, every wide, every close-up, every drone, oh my gosh. So it was a real challenge at first. When I started filming season 1, I remember texting my husband before the first scene, literally before the first scene. We kept all these text messages, and I said, I'm so nervous. And I said, I'm the wrong person for this role. They picked the wrong person. You need to come and pick me up right now. I'm just going to tell them that I quit, because I've never had a presenting job before. And then I did the first scene, and 2.5 hours later, because each 5-minute segment is you film for 2.5 hours to get 5 minutes, and that is true. But they are long days. But I absolutely have to say, I love it, because I love public speaking. I love this role, and it also gives me an opportunity, in the nicest possible way, to switch off from the yoga world that I've been immersed in for over 12 years. And that kind of goes back to this yoga teacher burnout. You know, if you're constantly teaching all of the time and you don't have another outlet, you're going to get burnt out. So it's allowing yoga to work through you to help you find sort of those niches that you are drawn to, and then creating something from that, because that can become an outlet from the constant teaching of the yoga classes, which of course we love, but we got to be honest here. You teach so many, you can get burnt out.
Yeah, totally. And it's going slightly off track, but we've spoken a lot about diversifying your offering, because if you are just teaching, let's say now, the regular Zoom online class, and you're doing 25 of them a week, you're going to be knackered, you're going to burn out, and you're not going to make enough money to sustain a life, let's say, in London. So you have to think about how you can diversify your offering. And your teacher training really, really helped me with that. What was it was called was it Mandala, and I'm trying to remember what the name
so
of
it's
the
just
training was.
Yeah, so we just shorten it. We just call it Mandala and mentoring. So you learn how to sequence 360 around the mat, and then I do what I call how to build your yoga brand. So it's how to build your yoga brand, and it's really, and we've had to change it obviously this year a little bit, but to make it much more online focused. So looking at things of how to build your membership subscription base. Do you need to, I use something personally called Patreon that helps me build my membership. That might not be right for everybody, but looking at ways that you can build your online community and of course your online offering, but not forgetting about how important, as you and I talked at the very beginning, your local community. So even in this day and age where we are indoors much more and everything is through the screen, you still have a local community, whether it's your local village, your local town, your local city. It doesn't mean you can't get out there and be on the local radio station or in the local paper or in the local magazine. And I always tell people, yes, things have gone online, but don't forget about traditional media. It doesn't mean being in, the Evening Standard or the Times. You're probably better off being in one of your local papers, because you'll get more people interested in you because they're like, oh, she or he is a local gal or guy, rather than reading in the Times. Nobody can really connect to you. Where is Dorset? Do you know what I mean? Whereas I do something in Dorset, they're like, oh, it's a Dorset gal. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And with that mentorship as well, something that I really learned, because I'm starting to mentor newer teachers as well.
Yeah.
Something that I felt like you just completely gave everything. Like you told us all your tips and tricks. Like there was no, like some people say to me, do you feel like there's a lot of comparison within the industry? And I'm like, for me, no, because I feel like we're all different people. There's a space for all of us. So I don't mind to give like everything up, to explain everything I do, because we're all going to do it uniquely and differently. But that was something that and it's just testament to your character as well, because I feel like you do that in like lots of areas of what you offer, but just completely like laying everything on the plate, being like, this is how I do it, and take it all,
Yeah. I know. I mean, we went into YouTube. We went into like the nuts and bolts of YouTube and your keywords and your end titles, and making sure your thumbnail that you create has the right JPEG name. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but if you want people to find your YouTube channel, your thumbnail, the name of the thumbnail needs to be the same of if it's Mandala Vinyasa Flow, that thumbnail needs to be called Mandala Vinyasa Flow. It's little things like that. And I want to be able to share what because like you, Sophie, I don't feel in competition with anybody, because I'm my own unique person. You're your own unique person, and we are all yogis. So we need to be able to share our offering. And I'm a massive believer, Sophie, and you know this, is honestly, I mean, a huge believer that if you are the type of person that isn't honest, doesn't give it out, is competition, is worried about if you're giving too much, if that person's going to do better than you, it's going to be very hard for you to succeed. If you're open and honest and truthful and you have compassion and you want to help others with a genuine heart, good things are going to happen to you. I cannot stress that enough. Give it all, right? That's what we should be giving. And let people take what me as a teacher, and a teacher to obviously students, but a teacher to other teachers, I want them to succeed. I want to give them everything I've learned, the mistakes that I've made, so that they can succeed, but they can also do it their own way and figure it out. But I also know that when I do that with a genuine heart of wanting to help others, I've learned and I know that only good things can come to me because I've been honest and truthful and authentic, and I have a heart that I want to help people. And competition for me is just, I'm too old for that probably anyway.
I love that. With one of the things that I feel like you put out a lot is to do with self-love and self-care, and I know a lot of people find those words like incredibly wishy-washy, and I think actually you were probably someone who really explained to me what that was, because in my world of TV I had no self-love or self-care at all, and you explained it in such simple ways, like things like just taking a minute to do a forward fold, or waking up a minute earlier to have your legs up the wall. But yeah, I'd love you to explain a little bit around that. And
I mean, especially now that we're all, most of us around the world, we have some type of there's some type of boundary going on. So we, whether we have to wear a mask or we can't get out of our home really, apart from essential shopping, things like that. So I think self-care now is more important than it's ever been, but it doesn't mean you have to carve out an hour and a half for a yoga class, especially if you're homeschooling your kids. So it's really important, and like it's what we talked about, what I always talk about, like put yourself in a forward fold while you're frying up the onions, right? Onions take about 2 minutes to fry up. Put yourself in a forward fold, get the head below the heart. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it actually makes a huge difference. And yes, we might go to bed feeling exhausted and we may not be able to journal, but I'm pretty sure we can probably give ourselves a nice bath, even if it's 4 or 5 minutes. For me, it's with 4 kids, all these, I've had 4 kids. Think about it. I've got a 22-year-old. So I've had kids around me now for 22 years, and finding those little crevices throughout the day of being able to just switch off for 2 minutes. And I don't mean switch off of like just sort of collapse anywhere, because what happens is if you just collapse on your sofa, your mind is going to start thinking of all the other things you have to do, what's happening in the future, what happened. You have to do something mindfully. So flopping on your sofa for 2 minutes, putting your feet up, if you're not doing a mindful activity there, your mind is going to start to wander. So I don't mind people flopping on the sofa, but do a breathing exercise while you're doing it. Listen to a 5-minute meditation while you're doing it. Open up an inspirational book while you're doing it. You got to be able to switch your mind off from the future and the past to get yourself into the present moment. So that's what I always tell people. Well, they say I don't have enough time, and I'll say to them, "But did you even sit down today?" "Well, I did for 2 minutes." "What did you do?" "Well, I just sat there and I thought about the things that I have to get done." No. Sit down and do something mindfully. A breathing exercise, whether it's 5 rounds of making your exhale longer than your inhale. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. You do that 5 times, you're at 50 seconds. That's a minute. Boom, you're done. You'll feel much better.
I love it because it's just such simple, accessible, manageable ways. I mean, I don't have kids, but the amount of mums out there who I'm sure have really, really taken so much from realizing that they could just have a couple of minutes to themselves doing something so simple. And because you give out so much of this wonderful advice, and you are like all the little stories you tell at the beginning and the end of class, I always find them so inspirational. I've seen you after class, people like poured around you, and they want a bit of you. They all want a bit of Julie, and they all want to get your advice on this and that and so on. And something you shared on our training that I'd love you just to talk a bit about, because I think I struggled with this, so it really hit home. You talked about how it's hard to put in those boundaries with people sometimes, and I think you went to see Carolyn Cowan, who gave you some advice on this. I'd love you just to talk through that.
Yeah, it was, I was really, as you know, Sophie, I was teaching classes that were packed with people. My Sunday night class would get 80. Sometimes people would sneak in. We'd have 85 there. Don't even ask how that happened. So probably not good for health and safety, but no. I mean, we had the right numbers, but then people would sneak in. And after class, I needed to get home and see my kids, because they had school the next day. I had to get home, and I would have sort of a queue of people wanting to get advice or whatever it was, which is lovely and wonderful. But I was spending 30 minutes after my class ended to get through all of these questions or advice or whatever it was. And because yoga, as we know, brings up a whole bunch of things for people. So people would get emotional, and it was, we aren't therapists, but sometimes just a good old hug can at least help a little bit. But I was finding myself after my classes just being absolutely sort of exhausted with as far as energy. I felt like all my energy was sort of taken away or I gave it away. It's not like I gave it away. It's not like they were taking it from me. I chose to give it away. And then I would come home to my kids and I really wouldn't have a lot to give to them. So it was me understanding that it was me who was giving it away. They weren't taking it from me. I was giving it to them. And so I met with Carolyn Cowan, who's a brilliant Kundalini teacher, but also she's a therapist. She's absolutely fantastic. And she really mentored me for about 6 weeks. It was about setting boundaries on me. Like, I didn't want to give that much energy or really I just gave my energy. The point was, what she taught me was, you just taught for an hour and a half or an hour. You have given your energy to everybody else. You're done. You're done teaching your class now, and you need to go home. And you're not there. You're not being paid, or and not that money has to do anything to you, but you know what I'm saying. I'm using that loosely. But you're not being paid to stay for an extra 30 minutes to continue teaching or to continue giving your energy away. You have just given them an hour and a half of your energy. You need to then leave. And so one of the things, it was great that she taught me was to, as soon as I end Shavasana, was to just start to walk out the class. So, and that's exactly what I would do. I would just end Shavasana, pack up my stuff, and leave the class. And some people would start to follow me, but you just keep walking. And you can keep having, in a sense, light conversations, because by the time you're out in the public space, no one's really going to open up to you too much. Do you see what I mean? If I stayed back in that room, everybody's leaving, but the people who are staying, you can get stuck there. You can get stuck in that corner. You can't leave, yeah? So, and this isn't anybody's fault but my own. So I learned just to start to leave the class. And what that opened up was just light conversations, people saying that they enjoyed the class. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I would say, thank you back. I've got to get back to my kids now. I've got to get back to my kids. So I was setting the boundary for others by saying, I've got to get back to my kids. And even when somebody would come up to me like, is there any way I could talk to you for 5 minutes? 5 minutes, by the way, as we know, is never 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? 5 minutes, that's just it's a loose term. That usually would end up being 15, 20 minutes. So I would just say, I'm really sorry. I don't even have 5 minutes. I need to go home and see my kids. And it was liberating. It was just liberating. And that was the boundary that I needed to set. And life became a lot easier on those Sunday nights when I was teaching those packed out classes.
I think I remember, and correct me if I got this wrong, the way you also phrased it was like, if someone said, can I have 5 minutes of your time, and you'd say something like, I'm really sorry, but by giving you 5 minutes, I'm taking away 5 minutes from my kids. But what I can do, because it's very you were like, what I can do is give you a hug, you know? And that was like your way of being like, doing something that's lovely and supportive, but also like, again, putting in your boundary.
Yep. That's right. And I learned that from Carolyn Cowan. So do you know what I mean? She was like, what can you give them? If you want to hug them, hug them. But you're giving them and then you're walking away. So it was great.
I want to know, because you are someone who is inspiring a lot of people, who inspires you?
So, do you know, there's so many people who inspire me now, especially in sort of the past couple of weeks. I know that I am going to say it because it's true. I think as an American, somebody who's watched these past 4 years, and without getting political, I'm not going to go there, obviously, but I think Kamala Harris is somebody who definitely has inspired me, and I think has inspired, millions across the globe, of somebody who shows you, whatever your skin color is, but shows you that no matter what, you work hard, you believe, and you fight for the causes that you believe in, you can do anything. So I think, Kamala as a woman, in particular, the first woman vice president of the United States, the first woman of color, to even hold that esteemed vice president office, is pretty spectacular. And I think it's somebody that I definitely look up to. I think, again, it's been such a political year, but I think Stacey Abrams, and I don't know if you know her, but in Georgia, oh my goodness, Stacey Abrams is a hero, a fighter, and somebody who's so passionate about her beliefs. So I use these two examples, not because I've really been touched by both of them, both of them really believing in their message, and believing so much in their message that they worked very hard to make sure that this message was able to sort of filtrate around them. And it's like what we talked about earlier, word of mouth. Your best form of inspiring people is word of mouth, going from door to door. And I use that in the going from door to door, rather than everything does not happen through a screen. The connections are made, through your community that you're creating. And both of these women, to me, have created, an extraordinary, an extraordinary community. So I think, I think the both of them in today's world, they have really, shined an incredible, an absolutely incredible beacon for really for the rest of us.
Well, it sort of reminds me of you, Julie, because like the hard grafting, you've definitely done so much of that. And then being like, really your message, I think, is loud and clear, and it's why people keep coming back to you.
Well, thank you, Sophie. Thank you. And I'm so glad we were able to have this chat. I was so happy when you asked me to be on your podcast because, listen, and remind everybody who's listening, Sophie used to assist in my classes at Tri-Yoga as well. You were my first, that is years ago, for those packed classes. I remember you just being like, can I assist for you? I'm like, sure. Yeah, it's great. So yeah.
It's one of those things as well. It's like, if you don't ask, you don't get. I remember literally you were like my, just everything. Like my husband used to joke like, are you going to your yoga class with your crush? Because I just talk about you so much. And like, I remember being like, I'm so nervous to go and speak to Julie to ask her if I can be an assistant. I probably would like come up at the end and then be like, no, I can't do it. And then I finally did it. And you were like, yeah, sure, just speak to whoever, and it was so easy.
Exactly.
And it's the same as this podcast. I was like, oh, I want to ask Julie. And in my head, I was like, no, she's going to be too busy for me, too busy. And straight away, you were like, yeah, of course.
Yeah. No, I know. Well, do you know what? And that's the thing. Also, I think it's, before my iPods died, but I think it's the other thing is if you, what you just said, if you don't ask, and people will say no. Do you know what I mean? Like, people will say no, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're saying no to you. They might be saying no to the time of the year, or the time of day. It's just not working for them now. So I always tell people, if people say no to you, please don't take it personally. It's just right now it's not going to work out for them. But it is also asking, like, asking and do I say yes to everything? No. But do I say yes to people that, I look up to? Sophie, I think you're doing a fantastic job on the community that you've created, and your journey, being able to watch your journey has been a real pleasure and highlight for me on everything that you've done. So saying yes to people that I look up to, that I'm like, oh my gosh, look at Sophie go. It's incredible. And I want to be able to say yes to people that I know I can have meaningful conversations with. And I knew that obviously you're one of them.
Oh, I so appreciate
That's
it.
Great.
Just before your headphones die, can you tell us what's coming up, like this year, work-wise? Like what's exciting you, and also like something that you're trying to bring more into your life that's not so much to do with the workspace?
Yeah. So this year, obviously, it's changed for everybody. As I said, I start filming season 2, thank goodness, in April. That will keep me busy until June, July, thank goodness. So a little bit more, and a little bit more TV is on the cards. I can't say other things, but there's other things that are happening as far as in the TV presenting world, which I'm really excited about, and I'll be able to share at some point. But right now I'm focused on season 2. Obviously, I'm, growing my, like many yoga teachers out there, same thing, growing my online community and my offering, and making sure I'm offering what I want to offer and what my students want as well. And I think for me, it's, listen, my kids are getting older. So I think this pandemic has, made me realize, as many of us done, is for me, family is so, it's my everything. It's always been my everything, but I've really seen it now for probably more in a different way than ever before, that time is precious. My family is the most precious thing. They're getting older, and I want to be able to savor every single second with them. So I think for me, that's the important thing. And then of course, running, I live where my job is. So I run, we don't have to touch it, but we're bringing Mapperton, that's the name of this historic house, into the 21st century, doing lots of fun projects as far as TV projects here, creating our own sort of what we're calling Mapperton Live. So we know that we won't be able to have visitors here for a while. So we're creating our own studio here, in a sense that we can bring the history of the Sandwich family to anybody in the world. So it's called Mapperton Live. That has been a massive project. I haven't even announced any of that on Instagram or anything like that, but behind the scenes, working on that. And I'm constantly working. I'm doing some more online teacher training courses. Everything I do is through my on-demand platform called Teachable. So I have a lot of eggs in the basket, but I like having a lot of eggs in the basket, whether it's TV presenting, doing stuff at Mapperton here, this historic house, and whether it's creating more online courses. I like to be busy, but family's the most important.
I love it. Thank you so much, Julie, for chatting to me.
Thank you, Sophie, for having me. This has been a real treat, Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening. For more inspirational tips, please head to www.sophiedear.com and sign up for my weekly wellness letter.